Good evening. Welcome to Talk Gnosis. Tonight we are continuing our discussion on the Gospel of Thomas, tonight with Saying 21. Good evening, Bishop Peterson. How are you this evening?
I am very good. How are you, Bishop Canterbury?
I am doing well. Well, for our listeners and viewers who are not familiar with this verse, you want to go ahead and give them a read?
Sure. This is actually kind of a long one, so pay close attention as I read it. Mary said to Jesus, "Whom are your disciples like?" He said, "They are like little children who have settled in a field which does not belong to them. When the owners of the field come, they will say, 'Leave us our field.' They are naked before them, in order to leave it to them and give them back their field. Therefore I say, if the master of the house knows that the thief is coming, he will keep watch before he comes, and will not let him dig through his house of his kingdom to carry off his things. You then be watchful over the world, gird your loins with great strength, that the robbers may find no way to come at you. For the advantage for which you look, they will find. May there be among you a man of understanding. When the fruit ripened, he came quickly, sickle in hand, and reaped it. He who has ears to hear, let him hear."
Interesting verse. Yeah, it is definitely one of the ones that I think that many of our commentators, both on our videos as well as in the scriptures, think it's one of the more Gnostic ones. When you agree?
Yes, it is, partly because it's so convoluted and confusing.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess Gnostics are supposed to be able to sort convoluted and confusing. But yes, it is a really convoluted one. And it was interesting when I was doing my research on what the commentators have had to say about this. And there's actually been quite a bit of commentary coming from both Gnostic scholars as well as folks like John Dominic Crossan and mainline biblical scholars. It is a very, very confusing passage, largely because it's a mishmash. You start off with little children in a field that are not theirs, and then you go on to then you have that story, but then you go into kind of a mishmash of different stories that have some parallels in the Synoptic Gospels, or as well as the canonical New Testament as well. So it's a kind of a mishmash, and I'm almost, when I was reading it and going over it and over it again, I was thinking, what was going on in this community? They clearly felt that all of these stories had some kind of a connection, and they just kind of mashed them into one. Or into one passage, but it's not an easy one to go through. So I'm going to recommend we just kind of pick through it.
Sure, absolutely. Well, I think right in the beginning, we get "Whom are your disciples like," which again kind of reminds me of some of the other verses, but it's usually kind of who do you say that I am? And this one, we've kind of have that reversal, because Mary's asking Jesus, "Who are your disciples like?" And which then he answers, "They are like children who have settled into a field which is not theirs." And I think that can be a lot of various interpretation. I think in one way we could take a look at that as kind of a difference of maybe the field owner. I think in many cases the field owner in kind of in the within the Gospels of the New Testament, you would kind of make the association of that being God is the owner of the field. But I think in this, that's not really what's being implied. I think that in many cases you could almost kind of interpret from this that the field owner is the demiurge. Some may say it also may have to do with the teachings that, you've got the idea of sort of the Old Testament, but now, you've got, the New Testament, the new Gospels, and who are kind of, so the disciples are more of heirs to those particular teachings and traditions. But I think it's definitely more of the reversal of what we would expect to see within the canon of the Gospels.
Yeah, we have, we have this field that is, instead of being owned by the God that we ought to properly worship, this field, in fact, belongs to somebody who is at odds with the
Hmm.
disciples.
Hmm.
And so I think that you're right. I mean, the ownership of the field is crucial here. The other thing that I find interesting is that the disciples are like little children. Now, we do see that parallel in the canonical scriptures that you have to become like a child
Hmm.
to enter the kingdom of heaven. There's also the notion of children being very important, that you don't offend a little one, and if you do, it would be better if a millstone was to go around your neck. But in this case, these children have settled in a field that does not belong to them. They are effectively trespassers.
Hmm.
And so the question is, why would little children end up in somebody else's field? Why would they be trespassing? Where are the adults?
Hmm.
Who's looking after these children? And it appears, in this case, we have a depiction of children who are kind of on their own.
Hmm.
And yeah, they've probably settled in a field because, well, there's food you can pick, and that you can hide a little bit from bad people or dogs or thieves or kidnappers or whatnot. But they're not supposed to be there. But they're there probably through no fault of their own. They don't have moral agency. Little children don't have moral agency. They were just
Hmm.
looking for a place to go. So this suggests the idea of Christ's disciples um, being really out of their own element. They don't have a place of their own. They don't have supervision,
Hmm.
and they, out of desperation, are in the only place where they can have a reasonable chance at safety and sustenance.
Hmm.
So that was something that occurred to me right away.
Hmm. Yeah, and one of the things that kind of occurred to me was kind of again the idea that of them being children that have settled in the field which is not theirs,
Mhm.
is the idea of even the field in this particular case, not the owner of the field, but the field itself, is basically kind of of the old teachings. I mean, the teachings of the demiurge god, the teachings that in the case of this early form of Christianity could have been even the teachings of the Old Testament as taught by the rabbis and the teachers of that particular time. And so these teachings in essence were I guess kind of depriving, if you will, of the of them of spiritual maturity. So maybe that's why they're like children, and it's not true. They really, I think later on when we start going into the ideas of the harvest, where they're kind of harvesting from that field, I think are they then able to grow and themselves find the teachings of that true unknown God, of the unknown Father. But yeah, lots of Gnostic-y complications in this particular verse.
Yeah, it is. And then we've got this whole bit where the owners of the field, and we
Hmm.
have multiple owners, by the way, owners of the field, at least in one translation.
Hmm.
And actually, I'm looking. No, we're looking at Leighton, Blatz, Dores. I mean, we're seeing the owners, so it is plural.
Hmm.
Are coming up, and they come and say, "Leave us our field."
Hmm.
Well, okay. And so they're ordering the children out. The children are being forced to leave what is not theirs.
Hmm.
And then it goes on to say they are naked before them in order to leave it to them and give them back their field. Doras actually leaves, I think, the nudity out of it, but Leighton in Blots, it's right there.
Hmm.
We have the children. It appears as though, according to the commentators, that the children are taking their clothes off.
Hmm.
So we're left with these naked children now who are not putting up any resistance. And we've talked about in the Gospel of Thomas, there's this notion of standing for yourself, standing, resisting, that sort of thing. But in this, we have the children amscraying right away upon
Hmm.
command and even leaving their clothes behind them. So
Hmm.
some of the commentators have basically stated that um, this depicts the shedding of the body.
Yes.
That the children, that we're okay when this world kills us. Okay, We shed our earthly garments, and we're out of there, and that's a good and positive thing. So that certainly is one interpretation. But what I find interesting, again, is this notion of complete non-resistance to the opposition. Take your clothes off and go and give it back to them. So there's a sense in which it's depicting the field as something that the children are not entitled to. It doesn't belong to them. And therefore, you're obedient to the fact that you don't have any right to be here necessarily, so you get out. So that's an interesting depiction compared to what some of the other scriptures we've discussed.
Absolutely. I think when I first read that passage, and then through kind of study of that passage, I guess I had sort of a movie playing out of my head, and sort of like this idea of again, it's the owners, of almost being teachers of the old law, and they're stripping themselves of these teachings like, hey, you don't think we've got authority to teach us? Fine. Take your silly, clothes. We want nothing of it. Stripping themselves of it, basically taking themselves away from any of the teachings of any of the indoctrination of any of the ideas that came from that particular school of thought. Then they're saying, we want none of it anymore. It's gone. You don't have to worry about us, preaching in your synagogues or doing this anymore, because you know what? We're out of here.
Yeah, we're out of here.
We're taking off our clothes. You can have these. Fine. You want to teach us stuff, you teach it, but we're not going to be part of this anymore.
It's interesting that you bring that up, Bishop Canterbury. When I read this, I was reminded of a story. And I have to verify this, but there was a situation where a Puritan, back in colonial America, a Puritan woman wanted to get married, but her previous husband had some debts. So she was required to marry her new husband naked, because if she wanted her, that she brought nothing from her past to the marriage. So there was, nothing that her previous husband had held or paid for. She was bringing none of that with her, and that this had a legal significance in terms of their marriage, so that her second husband would not be responsible for any of those debts. So I think what you're saying here kind of reminds me of that as well. That fine, we're even going to just take off our clothes. We're going to take off anything that we had from this world. We're going to get rid of them. And if there's any dust in these clothes, any bugs that have gotten in them, fine. We're going to ditch them, and we're out. And that's okay.
Because if you take that, continuation of that verse, when the owners of the field come, they say, "Leave us our field." They are naked before them in order to leave it to them and give it back and give them back their field. So it's so that's the way that I kind of interpret this, is like, hey, fine, you can have it back. It's all yours. It's all yours. Do with it what you want to. We're all good. So that is kind of the feeling that I definitely get from that.
So, well, Bishop Canterbury, we've got a lot more to work with on this passage, and I think we're going to be doing that in our upcoming Talk Gnosis After Dark podcast episode.
Yeah, too bad. I think we just gave our viewers a little bit of a teaser of this one, because, as you said, this is definitely one of the more Gnostic-y ones. So I would suggest to all of our viewers out there, make sure you do watch our After Dark, or listen to our After Dark podcast, where we're going to continue this one, because I'm sure this is going to get a lot more Gnostic-y with this particular verse. And
we're going to have a special guest for our podcast as well.
We are.
Monsignor Scott Rossbach of the Apostolic Joanite Church is going to be joining us, and he's been on the show before, and he always adds so much to our discussion. So I'm really looking forward to that. By the way, we want to ask, though, if you have a different take on this verse, if you've seen other things that we've missed so far, we would love to hear your opinions on it. So please let us know in the comments section under this video on YouTube. Also, we mentioned the After Dark podcast. For those of you who are supporters of this show, you get a special link that allows you to watch us view the show, to view us actually recording the show live, which can often be very amusing, but it also gives you kind of a sneak preview of what other people will be listening to later on. So if you have enjoyed this show and found it helpful and are interested in getting that sneak preview and being able to access the podcast early, you can go to Patreon, patreon.com/Gnostic. You can pledge a small amount of money per video or podcast and set a monthly cap on your donations, and every penny you contribute will directly support the development of this program.
Fabulous. And I got to say that we are definitely thankful for our supporters. As you stated, it definitely supports the development of this program and other programs that are being developed on our network.
Absolutely. Also, we do have a little bit of news. I'm pleased to report that there is going to be an independent sacramental conference in Black Mountain, North Carolina next year, November 4th through the 8th, 2015. For those of you who have followed the show for a while, I had my friend Bishop John Plummer as a guest on this show. He talked about the independent sacramental movement. Many, not all, but many Gnostic churches are a part of this very loose religious movement. And there's going to be a conference, and Bishop Plummer will be speaking there. And I'm hoping to be there, and I believe that some other folks in the Gnostic community are thinking about going as well. If you are interested in attending this conference, we won't keep on bringing it up in the show until it gets closer in, but you can go to their Facebook page at facebook.com/Independent Sacramental Conference, all one word. So that sounds like it's going to be a great opportunity to get to meet some other people, and I'm looking forward, hopefully, to meeting some of our viewers there.
Yeah, and when I first seen that, I'll be honest, I'm saying November 4th through 8th. Oh my God, that's not that far away. But then I seen it's next year. So I think that does give people plenty of time now, to kind of start, booking either hotel spaces, planning vacation times. It's more than a year off. So it definitely gives you time to plan. And it's definitely beautiful in that part of the country that time of year as well. And I think a great opportunity to meet others within the independent sacramental movement.
Absolutely. So, folks, we appreciate your watching the show. We always appreciate your feedback. You can certainly leave comments on YouTube. You can also send us an email at talkgnosis@gnosticnyc.com, and or you can visit us on Facebook as well. We have a great Facebook page, great community there. Please do like us and join us there. Coming up on Talk Gnosis, Bishop Ken, are you squeamish about Halloween?
No, not at all.
Oh, good. Because it's going to be All Hallows Eve, and we're going to be talking about Halloween in the world of the dead from a Gnostic viewpoint, which I'm sure is going to be a lot of fun. And, we look forward to having this discussion and to welcome you all back to the show. So thank you so much for joining us this evening, and we'll see you soon.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
This has been a production of the Gnostic NYC Network. For more information about this and all of the Gnostic NYC Network's programming, visit GnosticNYC.com. The opinions expressed in this show do not necessarily reflect the opinions of Gnostic NYC or any other organization. This show has been released under a Creative Commons Attribution Share Alike 4.0 International License. Thank you.